My name is Angelica. Welcome back to Holy Name of Jesus for part 2 of our Lenten mission. It is truly a pleasure to see each and every one of you here today, whether you're a familiar face or joining us for the first time, whether you were here yesterday or it's your first time today, welcome. And I'm sure there's lots to get out of tonight. So last night, Father Kevin Kelly brought hope to our hearts. He spoke about how we need to be on the lookout for signs of hope and to name them when we see them. He talked about how hope does not come on the timelines that we always expect, and how we could be missing out on the small moments of hope when we're fixated on how everything should unfold. We're going to continue to look at how to grow in hope in our lives and become disciples of hope for those around us. Please welcome back our guest speaker, Father Kevin Kelly.
Thank you. Good summary. Good to see you. Thank you for the summary. I was going to start with that. I'm going to add a couple things, if you don't mind. I got home last night after driving back to the villa and realized it's a real opportunity to be in a parish like this. And that's what my drive home was about, was recognizing the things we take for granted. It's not everywhere where you go and there's really good music, first of all. That's for sure. It's not everywhere we go where there's people running hospitality like it is here. I've had several people come up and say, I've been in the parish for 25, 30 years, and there was at least 2 people that have come up and said, I just joined the parish. It's not normal that at a youth retreat you get or a youth evening, dinner and exchange, you get great food and 30 young adults all in different parts of their lives and thinking about where they're going next. These are those little moments that I was trying to highlight in the examen that we're going to review again tonight, but it's the little things like that, when we connect with them, we start to really see hope. And this place is very much full of that, and I know it's your 60th anniversary this year. So I know there's going to be a number of other activities unfolding, but be really rooted in the fact that this is something special. That when we name it that way and when we start to live it out and let it live through our own lives, we start to be agents of that. And I really was so grateful on my drive home to just see and to have so many of those experiences in such a short period of time. So congratulations, but also don't miss out on the fact that that's unfolding because of you and for you. So that was where I kind of started my examen last night. I want to begin by reminding us that this idea of hope has to be rooted in the fact that we are loved by God. It's very easy to say that. It's very hard to believe it every day. Most of us struggle to see God loving us in ways that are very concrete and real. One of the gifts of the examen that we talked about, and for those that weren't here last night, you can scan the QR code and you'll get those 2 pages that we reviewed. But one of the gifts of the examen is actually seeing not just moments of hope or moments of mercy, but moments where we know that we are loved. Simple things, but very profound and important things. So this idea of hope being built on mercy is first built on the fact that even though we are sinners, God loves us first. We are sinners second. We can always be redeemed from sin. We will always be loved by God, and that's very important. And when we see and experience that mercy, we grow in knowing that we're lovable. It's an odd thing. Sin isn't a good thing, but sin brings us back to a space where we recalibrate our lives and go, geez, I don't want to keep doing this. I want to change. It brings to light transformation, but it also brings to light how we are forgiven and how we receive mercy. When we feel that, when we know that to be true, we become more forgiving and more merciful for others, which is a big part of hope as well. So we talked a lot about that, and just like Angelica said, we started to look at hope and patience, and then a couple concrete things about asking for hope and looking for hope. This idea of recognizing we must be patient when we're asking and seeking hope, so we don't expect it to come in ways that aren't God's plan for us. God has ways of giving us these graces. If we're only looking to receive a grace in a certain way, we so often miss how God is gracing us in ways we didn't expect. And that's important when we ask for hope, which is really the first message the Pope gives us in this Bull of Indiction for this Jubilee year of hope. He says, ask for the grace. And at times, we need to be begging for that grace because it is so hard to see at times hope in our lives. So asking for it, begging for that grace helps us to not only know we need it, but open up that second idea of I'm looking to see how God is gracing me with hope. And one of the things that's so interesting in this letter to kick off the year of hope, the Pope is saying it's often in places where we feel some degree of hopelessness that when we start to see hope there. I mentioned the tragedy of people fleeing a war-torn country. What a gift, though, for us to meet somebody that's gone through this and somehow is standing before us and thanking us for coming to Canada, thanking us for what we've been able to offer them. There's something incredibly profound in those moments that should be really the epitome of hopelessness, and yet there's something incredible that gets transformed in that. So looking for hope in places where we might not expect to find it is often the most profound experiences of hope. The Pope talks about it being peacemakers in places where there's no peace. A big part of that role is building and bringing hope to others. The Pope says it's having enthusiasm for life. We're so confronted at times by the challenges against life, however those may be in our world. Being enthusiastic for life opens up hope. Being present to those who are struggling. We had the question last night, what do we do when somebody before us has been diagnosed with terminal cancer? Again, you're never going to make that pain go away. What we can do is be present to them, be alive with them while they are here with us. So being with those who are struggling, those with disabilities, those who are lonely. I mentioned migrants, newcomers to our country. One of the privileges we get to do when we're in what's the first part of our formation as Jesuits, it's called the novitiate. And we do a number of different activities or experiments. One activity that I got to do was go to Amos, Quebec in the middle of February and March. Not the most beautiful time for at least me in Amos, Quebec. But I was there with a community, a L'Arche community. Have you heard of L'Arche? We have L'Arche here in Montreal, but we have it throughout Canada and many places in the world. L'Arche welcomes individuals with intellectual and maybe physical disabilities into community and then brings people together to support them. I had the privilege of being a part of one of those communities in the middle of winter, 7 hours north of Montreal. And it was a big discernment for me and my novice director whether I should go to this experience, partly because I grew up with a brother with Down syndrome. My brother Paul, I've mentioned him. I think I mentioned him when I was here a couple of weeks ago. Paul, for me, Paul was the center of our family and full of love. If you've ever been able to have the pleasure, the privilege of being with individuals with Down syndrome, there's just love so often radiating from them. Every time Paul would visit me in Montreal, I'd pick him up at the train station, and he'd stand at the end of the platform when he would recognize me just to get enough traction so he could run at me with his arms wide open and yell out, "Kev!" and he'd come running at me. That's just such a gift. When you have that experience of love in your life, it's easier to see how God might love you. So Paul was a big part of my family growing up, big part of all of our lives in our family. So the novice director said, you know, are you going to gain something from this experience going up to Amos? You've already, had a lot of opportunities to work with Paul and his friends. That may not be the best thing. And I thought, no, this will be great. And I kind of went up thinking, I'm going to be really good at this. I'd already sucked at a whole bunch of things that I had to do in my formation that I thought this will be one that I'll be successful at. Little did I know. I arrived and it was Lent, and we were journeying together in Lent. And one of the great gifts of L'Arche is they focus on their big charism, the big focus of how they see many ways their mission is tied to the washing of the feet on Holy Thursday. And I'd been struggling and being corrected by many people on my French while I was up in Amos. I had to make meals for the 15 people that lived in the community, those with disabilities and those that were helping and serving them, and I'm a terrible cook. So not only was I not succeeding, I was probably quite borderline failing in a big way. And so we come to this opportunity on Holy Thursday, and the priest that came to celebrate with us described the importance of what this celebration was about. It gave us an opportunity to look at those in our community where we think those who might need more care and more support than somebody else. And that's where we should go and wash that person's feet. That's a way of showing service and kindness and recognizing the fragility in the other person. So we're told, close your eyes and think about whose feet you want to wash. So I close my eyes and I'm thinking about the different people that I get to serve there, and I'm thinking, well, that person's struggling with this and that person's struggling with that. So I make the decision on whose feet I'm going to wash. And we're waiting. Priest says, okay, so now you're going to go stand before the person whose feet you feel called to wash. So I'm waiting and I'm thinking, okay, I'm pretty sure I know who I will go and do this very intimate act. And I open my eyes, and there's 7 people standing in front of me, waiting to wash my feet. I didn't laugh like you're laughing at that time. What it made me realize was how disconnected I was in this experience that was unfolding in front of me. I had been called here, in my mind, to be a success. And what was quite clear was I was being called to learn from those who showed me and offered me and served me in many, many, many more ways than I would have been able to do for them. Talk about hope. It's not what I felt in the moment, but it's very much what I feel now when I look back at that experience, that people can see through us. And it's often the people we don't think recognize that are the ones looking right into us and recognizing our own brokenness, our own need to be served. And it was a profound moment where I now look, anytime I think, oh, thank God I'm here to fix this or to be successful and help all these people, I open my eyes and I usually see the 7 people before me who were there not to give me hope. That was a byproduct of it, but those that were there to care for me. That's so important when we're looking for hope. If we think we're the ones doing all the work and needing to find it all and solve it all, we're missing how so many people in our own lives are showing us hope. And it's often where we least expect it, and where, as the Pope points out, it should be a place of hopelessness, and yet it's not only not that, it's actually where 15 years later, that's where I define hope in my life. We talked a lot about awareness. I spent time on this because so much of finding and seeing and sharing hope is becoming aware of the little moments in our day. We need to quiet our minds. That was the first step. A number of people came to me afterwards. Remember, I said, become or be aware that we're in the presence of God. For so many of us, that's one of the hardest things to do. We're waiting for something to happen rather than trusting nothing may happen. And that's being in the presence of God. It's okay that nothing happens, but we actually just relax. We quiet our mind. We let our day start to come back to us. We reconnect with our bodies. I often, at the end of the day, come back to a simple breathing exercise where I realize not once through the day did I ever think of breathing. It just happens. We don't go around thinking about breathing unless you have breathing challenges. Then you think about breathing. But we are so often disconnected physically. So much of becoming in the presence of God, reminding us we're there, is realizing we are a physical body that we never think about or often don't until we have chronic knee problems or back problems or other things. Becoming aware of that gets us out of our mind. It slows us down. It moves us into our whole body. That's what that first step means, becoming aware that God has created us and God is always present to us if we open our eyes, open our ears to God. So quieting our minds is a big part of that awareness. Turning off distractions. I always ask when somebody said, oh, I'm full of distractions in prayer. I always say, tell me what a distraction is. And if they say, I'm listing all the things that I need to get at Costco, I agree, that's probably a distraction. But so often people say, well, I just have this image of this neighbor kid that I used to know, and I wondered about where he was and what he was doing. And so I'm thinking about this, and then I'm thinking about being a kid at that time. So those are distractions I need to put aside. I would challenge you, that's not a distraction. That may be how God is opening something up within us. We're so waiting to hear God's voice. We're not looking at the images that are in our minds that are given to us by God, I believe. We're not looking at memories. We're not looking at our imagination in a way that's maybe how God is opening up and communicating to us. God can speak to us. I have on occasion heard something like a sentence that I think, where did that come from? That can happen. But more often than not, my experience of God is a memory within the day, something like a spotlight going on when I'm speaking to somebody and they're saying something and I'm thinking, wow, this is really important. Something is important in what's happening here. Those are the things that I come back to in my examining. I didn't say this, I related it to setting expectations, but set realistic expectations for this examen. Don't expect Mary to appear to you. She very well may, and that has happened and can happen. But it may not be the thing that unfolds tonight. So if my expectations are, I'll just let God speak to me, I'm more likely to hear or see or feel what God might be bringing than in the way that I described it or thought it should be. It's the same idea I said before, but it's so important to come back to setting realistic goals as we let our day unfold in this examen. And the second step, does anybody remember what it was? There were 5 steps. Who did their homework? What was the second step? Gratitude. The most important thing. When our mind is busy, when we're frustrated with somebody, when we're really tired, whatever the circumstance, coming back to gratitude relaxes us and opens our minds up. We're going to talk about that in the sense of wonder and awe. So be grateful. We know this. But really being grateful for the small and the little things. It's so helpful to connect in those simple ways. So that was a little bit about what we talked about with respect to the examen and self-awareness. I realized I didn't have my clock. That's never good. Oh, I'm right on time. I want to talk about a couple of other things. When I think of, and we had a great question, how do we help young people who so often are struggling with hope, find hope? For me, young people open up for me this idea of wonder and awe. I'm a scientist by training. I mentioned I worked for a pharma company. I was in research with a pharma company, so my background is in science. And for so many, science and church seems to be in conflict. I've been blessed to be with people that have helped me maybe resolve that if it wasn't always the case. But I'm fascinated by science research that in some way, directly or indirectly, kind of confirms things we know because of our faith and our beliefs. So I love psychological research, and many psychologists are researching these ideas of wonder and awe. A couple of things that they've already found out, and you can search this online, but what have researchers found out when they study wonder and awe? One of them is being in awe of something changes the perception of self. We start to feel smaller, not insignificant, but smaller in the comparison of the grandeur of our planet or of our universe. It doesn't mean insignificant, it just means there is so much greater than us. So in a very secular study, this was looked at, and it was found when people were in wonder or awe, they experienced that self feeling smaller, feeling quiet, and feeling humble. For example, when people were taken to the Grand Canyon and asked to look at the Grand Canyon, they had drawn a picture of themselves compared to a tree before the Grand Canyon experience. And then they would put themselves in perspective of a tree later. And by nature, they just were smaller, much, much smaller than the tree was. This kind of seems like, who cares? But there's something profound in this. When we recognize that we fit in this world, but that this world, this creation around us is so great, it changes how we interact in our own lives. My favorite research it was done by a team at Berkeley, and I'll spend a bit of time talking about it because for me, it opens up hope hope in a very real way. The study looked at two different groups. They divided students into the experimental group, where I'll talk about that, and then it was the control group. And the control group were asked to fill in a questionnaire and then stand looking at a concrete wall, one of the walls of a building on the school campus. These were all university students. They were asked to stand there for 15 minutes staring at the wall. And then they were asked a number of questions afterwards, and we'll come back to that. The experimental group were put on buses and driven to the Pacific coast and asked to look over the coast at these massive eucalyptus trees that were all along the coast before the ocean border. And they were asked to stand and look at this amazing, have you ever seen these trees? They're amazing. To look at this and for 15 minutes. Then they would compare the questionnaires, same questionnaires answered by the two groups. One of the things that was clear was the sense of humility and rootedness that came out in this group, while this group that looked at the wall never connected with that. They went on and showed so many different differences between what these two groups were, but the most profound to me was they thought they had finished the study or the research, but they would walk back into the school or walk back into the bus, and there'd be a $5 bill at the entrance of either the building or the stairs. Almost 100% of those that had seen this eucalyptus tree, that had looked over this vast ocean, that had felt themselves feeling enormous, that the world around them was enormous, would pick up that $5 bill and give it to the researcher. Those that would walk into the building would pick it up and keep it because they assumed it was dropped and nobody would pick it up, so they took it. It's not that they're bad people. It's that altruism, the gift of being aware of the other and wanting to serve the other, was more prominent when wonder and awe had touched us. What an amazing thing to recognize that if we spend time, if we practice being in wonder and awe at a little baby, or at an incredible vista looking over an ocean, or coming to the Villa Saint-Martin, this is my plug right now for coming to the Villa, looking over Lac des Deux Montagnes, whatever that is, when we connect with that, it literally changes our perspective of the other. We are more willing to serve, we're more likely to give $5 back, we're more attentive to the other. This is directly building hope. When we make that link, we see hope very tangibly. So, how do we do this wonder and awe thing? How do we become more aware of it? Some of the other data that they found, I'm going to come back to that, but some of the data they found, it slows down when they completed these questionnaires and they had their blood pressure taken and their heart rate taken. Being in wonder and awe slows down our heart rate because it has a direct impact on our parasympathetic nervous system. It relaxes us. People that were looking out at this world, at this beauty, were more relaxed than those that were staring at a concrete wall. I don't know what you look at your desk at work if you work at a desk. But we spend a lot of time sitting and looking at stuff. It's usually a computer. I wonder why we get so stressed. I wonder why that feeling of pressure is there. If we change that up, it literally slows down our heart rate and we feel more relaxed. Interestingly, at the same point, we are less fearful connected to that because we're more relaxed, we're more in tune and can decipher real risk or real threat versus just what's happening in our own minds, and we can separate those out. There's a sense of wanting to work and be with others when we're in this space. So many fundamental gifts that we get out of this gift of the Holy Spirit. I love, as I said, when science catches up with what happens in our faith. But I think most importantly here is we have to work at this. It's not, we somehow think it should just happen. The gift of the Holy Spirit is given to us in confirmation, but are we working with it? Are we energizing it? The Pope talks very clearly about how do we cooperate with this gift, this grace of wonder and awe. One of the things that needs to be done is admitting that we can't explain the Grand Canyon or the beauty of the Pacific Ocean. It is beyond us. It allows us to embrace or accept mystery, something science will never be able to answer, as good and as much progress science may make. Our world is full of mystery. Embracing and understanding mystery helps us to grow in hope. Letting the baffling, the difficult, recognizing I can't answer it all, nor can I solve things, is a gift of wonder. It's a gift of this mystery. Also helps us to let go of fear, to open us up, like those studies showed, to the other, to not needing to be the one to fix or solve it. It changes our perspective. The Pope talks very clearly about practicing wonder. Where do we do this? I get to live at the villa with two artists, a Holy Cross sister and a man that was a Jesuit who left the Jesuit, both of them artists who have this incredible talent of making beauty in a room where I just see a room. They'll set up for a retreat and it's a spectacular example of creativity and beauty. Go to an art museum. Look at creation. Go for a walk. Admire trees. Admire people's gardens. This opens us up. We see and live creativity. It's something to be practiced. And just like I've said with hope and many other things, ask for this grace. It's so interesting. We see it in children. At any age, when kids are playing and their imagination is pouring out of them, we see this incredible world unfolding all before them. There's something spectacular about that. So where we think there's so little hope at times is exactly maybe where we should be looking. Where are we seeing hope come out of kids, of young adults? Where is their hope coming from? And are we connecting with it? And are we then practicing that hope ourselves, that wonder and awe? The last idea I want to share about is also looking at a place sometimes where we wonder if there is hope. A number of elderly people at the end of their lives face a lot of challenges, whether it's physical ailments. My dad passed away a couple of years ago from dementia, and it was so challenging to watch that unfold. And every one of us is living with these challenges, whether ourselves or whether our loved ones, our parents or other family members. Except if we only see that, we're missing something else that wise sages, those who have lived a full life, offer us. I was blessed with a grandmother who lived to 99 years old. She died after feeling quite well. About 2 weeks later, had some couple of heart issues, but she basically told us all, she said, I think I'm ready to go. I think I'm ready to die. And literally, she died 2 weeks later. Like, we're all like, who is this that gets to predict their own death? But she had lived such a full life. At 95, she bought a new car. That's confidence. It was a brand new green Honda CR-V, and she lived in a small town of Perth, Ontario. She would drive down the road at 95, and it was like the Red Sea parting. Everybody knew who she was. Everybody cleared the way. She was always so proud that she never was in any accidents. We knew the truth. Everybody else helped my grandmother by not getting in her way. But she would drive. The reason for the car is she went and volunteered with old people at 95. Very seriously. She would go to the local retirement community that was providing care for people, and she would feed them lunch at 95. The last couple years of her life was the beginning of the pandemic, and she wasn't able to do that anymore. But I would sit, and she would be the person you'd want to go and get ideas from her, and she did have them. But she was always the first person that would say, "Tell me everything that's happened since I've last seen you." And she would listen like nobody else in my life would ever listen. She had lived a life that was very full. As I said, she made a decision with God, I assume, that she was at the end, and she died very peacefully, very happily. But she knew how to help others be listened to and heard. Each one of us has, hopefully, somebody like that in their lives. These are people that live this incredible resilience. They've lived through life. My grandmother lived through 2 world wars. You know, that's incredible. She had 2 children die, one as a child and one as an adult who died of cancer, my aunt. She had been with my grandfather. They were married. My grandfather died before her, almost 70 years. He was an alcoholic, very much recovered later in his life, but for 20 years was not in recovery. And she lived through the pain that many have lived through, that struggle of somebody coming to recognize their need to recover. Very difficult, lots of joy, lots of excitement, lots of great happiness. But like every life, lots of pain, lots of difficulty, lots of trauma even. But the resilience that comes from that kind of life has to be gained, has to be lived, to be received. And that resilience that she had was so profound. I still look at her when I'm facing so many challenges, and I think back to what would she be telling me as advice. And it was always very simple and straightforward, and absolutely one because she lived it and she found out how. A gift for sure, grace given by God, but practiced in her living. What does resilience show us? Well, when we're feeling hopeless, we have to get in touch with this sense of resilience that's in each one of us. Some of us, it just pours out. Others, we struggle with it. But she would never see a problem as insurmountable because she had surmounted problems. She'd failed lots, but she knew it was possible to overcome difficult situations. She knew change was always going to happen. There's no question change is going to happen in our lives. Are we open to seeing that? Are we accepting of it? Are we participating or are we resisting? Change is such an important gift to recognize that gift of resilience. For her, resilience, and this has been said by so many, came from her greatest desire meeting God, however that was. Her belief that she knew she was on the right track when her greatest desire aligned with that of God's. That's a principle in Ignatian spirituality. We will most see and align with God when we know our greatest desire. When we know that, there's resilience that abounds. She made connections with people. She was a fierce euchre player and bridge player, and she played with everybody, and you did not intervene or interrupt bridge afternoons. That's where my grandmother's social and connections happened with so many. I'm sure she had it, but something that the Pope talks so much about with respect to resilience is this idea of knowing and being gentle with ourselves, self-care. Are you recognizing where you're struggling, and are you asking for help where you can get it? Self-care is essential in becoming more resilient. Those are some ideas. This idea of, again, so often people in their later part of life, we don't always recognize as maybe a place of hope. For me, my grandmother, for you, I'm sure others, show this great resilience that builds hope. Same other extreme, wonder and awe is most evident in young people. If you are missing young wonder and awe, somehow connect with some kids. They will teach you. These are the things that help us to grow, to seek and look for this gift of hope in our life, but also to share it with others. The final idea I want to leave you with is this whole idea of pilgrimage as hope. The Pope's not only called us all to be in this year of hope, but has named it Pilgrims of Hope. I know there's a group of 6 young adults going to Rome for this experience this year, to go through these doors, these gates, these Jubilee year gates of hope or doors of hope. This idea of pilgrimage is something each one of us lives to some degree in our lives. We're all on a journey. Pilgrimage is about seeing and desiring a destination, but letting God's providence help me move through it, to learn how God is shaping me through the journey. It's not about from A to B getting there. It's about recognizing what God is bringing along on that journey. Pilgrimage is essential to how we grow, being open and seeing and experiencing God's providence. The reason I think the Pope connects hope and pilgrimage is for the very reason it's a journey we're supposed to be living. Hope isn't necessarily supposed to be easy. If it's something we have to ask for, if it's something we have to seek, if it's something we have to practice, if it's something we have to work at so we can share it with others, it's meant to be a bit of an effort. It's not just, oh, Tom or Janice is such a hopeful person, they're so lucky. It's about a journey where we need to engage it. If we're going to share it with others, we have to have it hard-won sometimes. That's this gift. If we're seeking it, we have to see it and experience it, but we also have to be sharing it with others. That comes with effort and work. I'm going to close with the Pope's final lines in this bull of indiction. Again, if you haven't looked it up, if you go and search Hope Does Not Disappoint, you'll find it. It's a document. Certainly it's in many places, but it's on the Vatican website. This is what the Pope writes at the closure of the document. Let us even now be drawn to this hope. Through our witness, may hope spread to all those who anxiously seek it. May the way we live our lives say to them in so many words, hope in the Lord, hope firm, take heart, and hope in the Lord, from Psalm 27. May the power of hope fill our days as we await with confidence the coming of the Lord Jesus Christ, to whom be praise and glory now and forever. Amen. That's all I got. We're going to invite you back up. Yeah, perfect. Thank you. We'll have some time for questions. Great, thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Father Kevin. I think absolutely we should be looking at wonder and awe as a way to bring that hope back into our lives. And I really like the connection you made with wonder and awe and how it physically affects us too. So we're going to take some time in personal prayer, and I invite you to think about what idea that was presented either this evening or even last night. What was it that is helpful to building hope in your life? And there's a couple other questions. What fills you with wonder and awe? And who is someone you find exceptionally resilient? So we're going to take some time in silence, and you can even pull out the prayer sheet if that helps.